Back to the Nutrimedical Report, and one of our favorite guys, John, that has manufactured the amazing Nutridine. It's our most important nutraceutical, and we hear lots of looky-loo type, copycat products marketed everywhere that try to say they're equivalent to Nutridine, and that's just a bold-faced and obscene lie. And people need to understand that monatomic Tesla-activated iodine, which has a different spectra, also has a different complete action. If you take iodides, potassium iodate and so on, is toxic, and it actually can shut off your thyroid and peripheral metabolism. Whereas if you take Nutridine, it does the exact opposite. And I'm just going to run through some of the functions. John, when you make Nutridine, it's a dangerous process, it's a complex process, and it's a process where you've managed to master something that no one else in history has done. You've actually able to convert crystalline, reagent-grade, absolutely pure iodine crystals into the most powerful activated nutraceutical to resurrect mitochondria, block radiotoxins and electropollution, literally reverse the primary cause of aging, which is mitochondriopathy, kill all known pathogens, which means it will kill viruses, mycobacteria, and tetanus, etc. Parasites, like schizont parasites of malaria, chikungunya, to you name it, intracellular pathogens. And I tell people to put the Nutridine even in their Sinupulse Elite for inhalation therapy with normal saline, or Sinu Air powder in there's the Sinupulse Elite, and in their HydroFloss, which is a new machine we're recommending, the HydroFloss, which you can buy at Amazon. It's, I think, about $90. The Sinupulse Elite's about, I think, $130, $140. But these are essential, and you have to use Nutridine in them if you want to really clear them. And if you have CPAP, you want to put Nutridine in your CPAP so you don't end up with pathogens in your airway lines and your mask, etc. So there's nothing like Nutridine. Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what other people try to say is their basis?
Yes, Dr. Bill. What we do is a highly scientific process. We have scientists work with us all the time to improve it and to verify that it is working, that we are separating these molecules into the monatomic state. We go to extreme lengths to make sure that we do put out a quality product. And other people have such weird ideas that they can just run electricity through the water and through their alcohol iodine solution, and it'll change it. It will not. There's no way to put the energy into the atom except through the process, the
right.
Tesla field that we use, and we're able to turn this into Nutridine, and it is a quality product, and it
right.
definitely provides the individual body with what it needs to heal and to grow and to function properly.
Right, the queen of your cells, by the way, there's no king in the cells, except maybe if you want to talk about male cells, say Y chromosome, but the queen in the cell is the mitochondria. And the crown on the queen's head is made of T3, and the material that the T3 is made of, the gold, if you want to call it, is monatomic iodine. Okay, so the body has a minimum capacity. I'm going to run through 22 items that iodine in its proper plasma form does in the body that is unique. And your thyroid will bioconvert and take even salt or seaweed and convert a very tiny amount of it into the monatomic plasma form, but it's very limited. Iodine helps synthesize the thyroid hormones. It prevents both hypothyroidism and hyper. So in other words, people are saying, I'm hyperthyroid, doc. You need a Nutridine. You need mitothyroid to help repair the gland because the gland's under attack. It's either an autoimmune thyroiditis or it's a toxic thyroiditis. And you can, by the way, if you're taking fluoridated salts like toothpaste, fluoridated water, etc., you're actually displacing iodine, and you're creating not triiodothyronine, which is T3, you're creating trifluorothionein, which is very toxic. It locks on in what's called non-competitively inhibits the T3 receptor on the crystallogy of the mitochondria and shuts off your oxidative metabolic ability to make ATP and NADH, the high energy molecules. Number two, it makes iodine reverses hypo and hyperthyroidism as well, but it also supports apoptosis, which means the rebuilding of tissues and the actual reversal of aging. You've got to get rid of old senescent cells. In fact, the fastest time when you have the most apoptosis is in utero. So if you have iodine deficiency and you want to have a healthy baby, you should, as a pregnant mother, be taking extra Nutriodine. Iodine activates hormone receptors and prevents certain forms of cancer. It actually is necessary for making sex hormones, adrenal stress hormones, and actually activating the receptors to prevent cancer cell activation in your cells. It protects the ATP and NADH production. It prevents fibrocystic breast disease and endometriosis of the uterine lining. It helps to displace the toxic chemicals like bisphenol A and xenotoxins. It decreases insulin needs. So in other words, it reverses insulin receptor imbalance. It supports protein synthesis. It also protects against pathogens, super pathogens like the flu and other pathogens. It destroys pathogens, molds, fungi, parasites, and malaria. Our 300-plus files was sent over to Ragman Ministries in Liberia this January past, and we had not one health professional or one villager got Ebola that received our Nutrimedical. It supports immune function, so it maximizes natural killer cells. Without iodine, your NK killer cells can't generate superoxide anion-free radical to kill any pathogen, virus, etc. It gets rid of toxic halides, including radioactive iodine, but also fluoride, chloride, bromide, and resurrecting your mitochondria from 200-plus radiotoxins. And it reverses the electropollution from electromagnetic pollution. It regulates the estrogen production in your ovaries and male production of male hormones, and your adrenal hormones, your steroid hormones, including melatonin. It's an anti-mucolytic, which means it breaks up mucus and catarrh. If you're using it in your sinupulsal lead or you're inhaling it, it's going to break up the mucus. It neutralizes hydroxyl ions and hydrates cells. It makes you smarter. It raises the ATP level of your astrocytes so you create neural networks much more easily. It prevents heart disease because all people that have heart disease have hypometabolism, and T3 will reverse that. Iodine is needed with the use of cordless phones, cell phones, and smart meters to prevent hypothyroidism. So basically all these, and train your tissues and put them under stress and actually make you hypometabolic. So all these we call switching mode power supplies and scalar radiation. It supports pregnancy. The fetus goes through more apoptosis than any other developmental stage, as I mentioned earlier. And high doses of iodine may be used to reverse certain diseases such as cancer, fibrocystic breast disease, Alzheimer's, syphilis, skin lesions, chronic lung disease, cretinism, which is basically thyroid deficiency in utero, and goiter. High doses may be used for wounds, bed sores, inflammatory and traumatic. You can literally put this on a wound, and you can see it literally healing in hours, not days. It's just amazing. And it reverses diminishing scar tissue, keloid formation, and Dupuytren's contracture of the hand, because of the plantar fascia, or Peyronie's disease of the penis, where you get contractures like the former President Bill Clinton had Peyronie's disease. That's just 22 of the top 2 things that iodine does. And the plasma-activated Tesla form is amazing. I mean, you can have somebody with chronic cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, etc., and you start giving it to them, and people say, the lights went on. And this is even before we add our Cognition Plus, brain power, all the other things like Neurogen to rebuild the tissues. Just being in Nutrimedical does that many miraculous things. It's just mind-blowing how powerful and important this is. It literally is a prophetic vision now from Edgar Casey coming to life now with what you've done, John. It's amazing.
Yes, it is. It really is. We've been amazed that it's so widely accepted among the missionaries and people who really have no.
Yeah, they get it. When they get it from us, they can't believe how we were able to reverse malaria, tuberculosis or pot spine of the spine, even treating cancer of the untouchables in India. In Africa, we have people in coma where they put a nasal feeding tube down and they actually are in coma. We give them 20 to 30 drops every 2 hours, and literally within a day they're pulling out of coma because it gets rid of the schizon parasites even in their brain. It's amazing. It'll kill off the amoebiasis, and there's a young girl, I think it died last year, 2014, in Florida from amoebiasis that goes through her nose to her cribriform plate in the top of her nasal cavity to her brain and causes a amoebiasis septic meningitis. And this, by the way, will penetrate through all body cavities, all biofilms, and kill all pathogens. So every intensive care unit, every ICU, every emergency department, every emergency kit, every EMT should have Nutrimedical with them all times. Amazing. Stay right there, John. And welcome back. And, of course, John, I want to talk a little bit about the history of iodine. What's interesting to me is that people should understand how bad this whole story is in terms of what iodine does. What they did is the breads back in the 1970s used to have iodine in the bread because they realized that you're getting lower IQs, you're ending up with cretinism and thyroid failure and goiter in people, so they added iodized salt, which is still pretty darn inferior. You're just adding iodized salt or potassium iodide to salt at very low concentrations. Your thyroid has to then convert it to a monatomic form for it to be utilized by the thyroid or incorporate in thyroid hormone. And even with that very inferior form, your body could convert some of it. But when they add fluoride, water, and salts of bromide to even the bread now, the standard bread now is actually made with a bromide salt rather than iodine now, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's terrible. They don't have to do that. They're trying to save a few pennies by putting bromide in instead of iodine, and it's really
it's ridiculous. Well, it does attach also to the gluten fraction, and people need to realize the gliadin fraction of wheat gluten is the primary peptide that is identical to the 10 amino acids of the S100 protein in your brain. So you do not see cultures where people get Alzheimer's disease unless they have gluten, and gluten is modified by glyphosates or bromide salts that are halide, similar to iodine, but it actually creates an allergenic stimuli because it acts as a halide hapten, Hapten, that actually amplifies autoimmune diseases. So people need to understand that. So you're taking Nutrimedical. Part of the reason why people are getting sensitized to gluten is it's glyphosate and bromide salts, which are literally damaging your mitochondria. Nasty, nasty stuff. And people need to understand this. And they're being told lots of packs of lies by all kinds of pseudo-experts out there that don't really understand how important this is. And we're talking about disasters, whether it's talking about radiological disasters like Fukushima Daiichi, or biological disasters like the release of a superweapon. They're both the first of our packs for our radiation protection protocol and for protection against bioweapons is Nutrimedical. Then we have our NutriDefense I designed that has natural killer cell amplifiers, IP6, and ability to destroy all viral capsids of all DNA and RNA viruses, NIOSH N95 masks, and of course we have Allison Med, 200 milligrams more than Alamed, and Silver 100, the most powerful silver. But Nutrimedical is amazing. It does uniquely three things. Number one, it's the most powerful stimulant for new mitochondria, mitochondriogenesis. It's the only thing that will actually stimulate what we call reversal of mitochondrial failure. It restores tissue redox potential and ATP levels like anything. It restores your stress hormones and your sex hormones. In fact, when you start taking Nutrimedical, if you've got low T or low thyroid induced hypothyroid, low levels of male hormone or female hormone, it starts to bring your body's hormones, the stress hormones and sex hormones, back to normal. It raises the redox potential of your brain so you can form neural networks again. So your brain starts to say, we have people start taking Nutrimedical and say, I can't believe it, Doc. I haven't ordered your Cognition Plus better, but my brain's already working better after the first class with Nutrimedical in it. And they say, well, how could that be? I said, well, you start raising the redox potential of your brain cells so they can form an action potential and neural network. You're going to have what's called thought. Thought requires the energy metabolism that's supported by mitochondria, and the most powerful stimulant is Nutrimedical. If you want to add to that CoQ10 Supreme, CoQ10 Ubiquinol, VascuCare, uridine, triacetyl uridine that is, mitochondrial catalysts, and of course Cognition Plus, Brain Power, and Synaptin. Neurogen and fatty acids, Nutrifos, and Omega Supreme Krill especially are going to help the brain as well as Neurogen. So when you're trying to repair mitochondrial membranes, we want to repair mitochondria and cellular function, and a good part of aging is just simply old or damaged mitochondria. In fact, you live as old and as well as your mitochondria. That's a good statement, isn't it? And you live as well as you take enough Nutrimedical. The average person, I think, should take at least 10 drops of Nutrimedical twice a day. The average adult child, probably half that dosage. And if you're under severe infectious stress, you should be taking at least 20 drops 4 times a day in water. And with a real serious danger like malaria or a parasite or cancer, you should be taking 30 to 40 drops 4 times a day, along with very high dose Power C, 60 grams equivalents a day, and 2 minoquinone 7 of full vitamin K2 for every 3 Power C to get yourself alkaline. But when you start getting a high redox potential and you counteract the acidity, the body just turns cancer cells back to normal and commits apoptosis. So it's a very powerful apoptosis signal, along with malignoblock, ellagic acid, and full vitamin K2 high dose Power C. So neat stuff. John, we've got stories from all over the world. Little girls with tissues burnt to the bone and they regenerate. People with skin burns. People with cancer in India. This stuff's amazing. I mean, it really is mind-boggling. I have my power drink. I just put another big dropper full of Nutridyne in my drink. So I got all my power drink I mentioned in hour 1 and hour 2 with Ryan. And in that is a pile of this real powerful monoatomic Tesla-activated iodine. My mitochondria are giving me high fives right now. They're saying, go, Deagle, go, man. You're 63 and getting younger every year. And I do. I feel younger every month I take this and do all my exercise routines and my hyperbaric chamber and all my fancy Nutrimeds. You don't need to get physically older as you get age chronologically. You don't. And you need to realize that you can regenerate your mitochondria and you can regenerate your tissues with things like our Mountain Red Velvet, oncomycin, myco D2, full vitamin K2, mycel D3, microdose, etc. But right at the top of the list for regeneration is Nutridyne. I can tell people I am so excited about this because if I had this when I was taking care of people in ICU, and I remember one of my cases in extremis back in Georgia back in 1987, the clerk at the insurance company said, well, no, doctor, we can't authorize that until the morning for the IV antibiotics to save this patient from meningitis. And the patient was already in coma. And I said, well, patient's in coma. I said, I'm going to give the drug anyway, even though it's $200 and some bucks for just the first pop. And it had to be done 3 times a day. And I said, well, we can't authorize it, Dr. Deagle, may not be covered. I said, look, I don't want a dead patient in the morning. If I had Nutridyne, I would have been giving it by nasal tube, even if they're in a coma, the Nutridyne, and it would help dramatically. So if you have a child, we have people that have serious illnesses and they're, dying or sick, or they've got an acute, ocular, let's say herpes of infection that's destroying their cornea, or they've got a meningitis, or they've got acute, inflammatory bowel problem, or peritonitis, and their appendix is going nuts, or their diverticuli. Start whacking it with Nutrimedical, and guess what? You recolonize with our living probiotic, take berberstatin, Alcimed, but the Nutrimedical will kill off the suckers, kill off Clostridia difficile, kill off the anaerobes, kill off the thing that's making you get peritonitis. And it'll wall it off and make sure that you heal. It's just absolutely mind-bogglingly amazing. It is. And if you're irrigating your sinuses or irrigating your teeth with the hydrofloss, the hydrofloss, by the way, changes the charge of the particles of the water, so it literally strips and bounces the plaque off your teeth. But if you put Nutridyne in the chamber with your hydrofloss, and you've used a Philips Sonicare Platinum 1, which is a toothbrush I recommend with a little ultraviolet light chamber to kind of sterilize it, this is the way to get your teeth clean, whitened, and prevent all the nanobacteria and crap that's in your mouth that's going to go to your arteries and your brain that's going to give you cancer, vascular disease, etc. But guess what you put in the chamber in both cases? Nutridyne. Wow. The mantra is Nutridyne. If you want to stay well, order it by the 6-packs and have lots of it around for God knows what's coming next. Take it every day, you and your pets, and they'll stay healthy. Medical Report, we have Mark Kaplan. And Mark, tell us your websites. I think you have several. And what your modus operandi is, what you're up to, and why you're such an interesting person that Dr. Bill decided to bring you on the program.
Well, because you have a warped sense of humor. That's why.
Well, yeah, I do have a warped sense of humor, but I hope it's warped in the right way. In other words, it's been warped by the world, and it's been unwarped by the Most High God. And I think one of your primary things you talk about is spiritual survival, but it also means intellectual survival and survival of
absolutely
how to do good in this world, which is to hear and do Shema, the will of the Most High God, whether it's medical, scientific, technical, geopolitical, legal, or otherwise. Yeah. And I think you covered a number of those topics. So let's rock and roll.
Let's head into the legal. I have a 22-year legal study career. I picked up law as a hobby while I was doing business endeavors. And it led me down the pathway of trying to come out of a form of economic or debt slavery. And after 22 years, I finally finished that journey. And then at the same time, which is just supposed, I met Kathleen, and I married her. And she had a ministry called Spiritual Survival. And you can go to her ministry and to her manual, which is spiritualsurvival.org. And that manual's been on the website since 1999. And she has had, we get about 12,000 hits a month to that website about people who are looking for the how-to of instituting biblical law into your life.
Now, it starts off, as you mentioned, and I like how you approach this. You approach it like a true scientist and logician, like the ancient Greeks philosophers, where you approach it as an issue of communication and the application of words and how you explain things to the population and the vulgarity of the common language compared to the higher languages. Can you explain that? Because a lot of these principles are, in fact, are really simple, but they're quite different than what are being taught in the churches or in the schools or universities or the public domains of the law, which has often perverted the language to create a matrix of control.
Exactly, and I actually had a judge tell me in court that common English was not spoken in that venue. And because of that, I had to actually learn a different language, and that's a legal language. And then at the same time, that led me to biblical law. And biblical law is the principle of law, and the law there is what is the actual genesis. And I didn't mean to mix that term. It's actually true. It is the genesis for all human law. What's happened is, over time, is that people have misused the man-made law to supplant and to make subservient the principles of law, but they can't go away. That's the basis of our existence.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love how you approach this, because let's explain something about, let's say, this survival handbook, because we have only 2 segments today, but we're going to bring you back on for a full hour here soon, because I want people to understand this and also listen to your show. Your radio show is on what network, and where are you located?
It's on Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm out of Idaho, and you can find it at RBN. I don't know if it goes, I don't want to come into your show, but you can find the archives on Republic Broadcast Network and go to the archives and
That's
enjoy.
Good. Excellent.
The other thing is, sometimes I do archives of my own, and you can find those on spiritualsurvival.org. There is an RBN Radio Mark's Journey page, and on that page there's a MediaFire link. That link goes to MediaFire, and I have a lot of documents, a lot of legal documents that I put up there that's actually evidence of what I'm talking about. So if you did want to go up and if you're a big reader, which we all should be, because liberty and library, it's all the same, where you must read to be free. So as we read through the evidence, then we can find some relief.
Right, and of course your work fits perfectly with Dr. Fred Graves, who's a Christian, the teacher of jurisdictionary. He'll be back on the show. We have a hyperlink on the front page under announcements of Dr. Fred Graves' course jurisdictionary. Let's talk about the book. I like the title,
by the way.
Yeah, wonderful. You have some chapters of this book, and it'll explain some of the principles behind your whole ministry and how it ties into the law. And really, the solution to restoring the Republic is restoring the sovereignty of mankind as made in the image of the Most High God, and recognizing that Father God, the God of the universe, is the bringer of law, bringer of justice, bringer of all love and mercy. And if we don't have these principles put into effect, we don't become sovereigns, we become subjects, and basically what the globalists would like to do is convert us to biological machines that can be genetically manipulated or eliminated, and they can create a caste society where they worship the god of powers, genetics, and engineering to re-engineer what the human race is, which is not sovereign, sovereign people.
That's been their goal for forever, from the dawn of history.
Right.
Because if you don't have fear, you don't have control. And if you don't put fear into people, you can't control them. You also can't make a profit. There's no profit in love, but there is salvation. And and I like to go back to Joshua 24:15. It says, "As this day I choose my master, and me and my house we choose the Lord." So right there you have the actual basis of the choice. You either choose one master or another, and those are the choices of our thoughts.
Right. In fact, I tell people that's the marriage supper. It talks about none is given in marriage, and really the metaphorical terms being. Marriage is a marriage of our soul, which is equivalent to our mind, to the will and the of God. So literally, when the spirit of the Eternal One is fused to our soul, which is not eternal until it's fused with the spirit of the Most High, we become eternal men and women on earth. Right. As I say to people, heaven starts today when you hear and do God's will, Shema, and hell becomes evident when the body drops away. So the reason why our world in America is going down the toilet is we don't recognize that God is the father of the U.S. Constitution and the liberty and the fact that we're sovereigns, including unborn children and the elderly that are being denied care under Obamacare. And the advance of science should glorify mankind and lengthen human lifespan, but not splice us with animal genes or create a new cyborg version of mankind that's an abomination before God, which in the book of Jasher, which James, the brother of Jesus, quotes, is a primary reason why in Genesis the flood of Noah was brought to destroy man's abominations upon the face of the earth, including not only walking their children for the fires for Moloch and Baal, but splicing human and animal DNA to create monstrosities, which is biblically placed there. People say, well, how did they have the gene technology? Yes, they did. They had this from the Nephilim, the fallen ones that came down here and spliced their DNA with humans. That's a fact.
Well, I will agree that there's a hidden cabal that have actually taken and made secret the technology that we had to actually to be more in tune with the Father, the Heavenly Father. And,
right.
and that is now become a secret. And again, it comes down to fear. They've held those ideas for themselves, and they've placed everybody into a place of fear. I will disagree with you, though, that through my studies I have found that man-made law, and even the Constitution, is supplanted over and over again. I actually know of about 7 different constitutions this country has gone through.
Right.
And when we ask them, do you believe in the Constitution, they don't know which 7 we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's always inferior because it's a faint reflection of the law of the Most High God, which is why it's been easily supplanted. And even in 1933, when the U.S. went through the revolution of actually becoming a full-blown 100% corporation, we live in the corporation of America. I mean, it really is pretty obscene. Yeah. We're no longer living in a republic.
But since then, since we have the Constitution for interdependence, and we also have international agreements, as has put us into an instrumentality. And under the law of instrumentality, if you are beholding 40% or more to another corporation, then you become its instrument, and you lose your independent character.
Which is why they're Obama's pushing so hard, even against Democrats, for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the transatlantic partnerships before you leave power next year.
The New World Order has been in place for a long time.
Yeah, it's an old world order just with whitewashed new titles.
Yeah, what's that? The old becomes new again.
Yeah, exactly. It's just whitewashed. Come back, and Mark will be back on next Tuesday, the first hour. That's hour number 1 at 2 Central Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time, and 3 on Tuesday, the day after the Labor Day weekend. So, Mark, let's continue. Let's go through the Lord's Prayer that you mentioned in Aramaic and convert it so people understand the English of what the real intention, what Jesus said. This is how you pray to the Father.
Yeah, this is very interesting. There's about 10 different versions, but I asked for guidance from the Holy Spirit, and this is the one that resonates with me. So I'll read this one. And it's quite different, but you can see the love and projection of Abba, the Father above, in it. And it's, O Lord of all radiance and vibration, soften the ground of our being and carve out a space within us where your presence can abide. Fill us with your creativity so that we may be empowered to bear the fruit of your mission. Let each of our actions bear fruit in accordance with your desire. Endow us with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish. Untie the tangled threads of our destiny that binds us as we release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. Do not let us be seduced by that which would divert us from our true purpose, but illuminate the opportunities of the present moment. For you are the ground and the fruitful vision, the birth, power, and fulfillment, as all is gathered and made whole once again.
Wow.
Quite a bit different than the King James.
Yeah, you can feel that kind of warming your bosom. You can almost feel like, ooh, that's like spiritual food is like hey, I've just had a 4-course meal now spiritually.
Well, and the thing is if you look at it, it's all love. It's not sin. It's not transgression. These words, these concepts, this whole thing is love. And when you understand that if we accepted the love and forgiveness of the Heavenly Father completely, that's all we need.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things I often tell people when I do, phone ministry or talk to people in person when I do conferences like with the Prophecy Club is I try to tell people, no matter what sin you've done, you often will cling to the sin, like it says in the Bible, the dog will go back to their vomit. And what people will often do is they'll say, it's unforgivable, I've done such terrible things, God can't forgive me. That's a form of reverse arrogance. It's like saying if the Creator God of the universe has made you and sees your sin, as it says in the Bible with King David, he said, I have sinned against you only, O God. In other words, he made a very simple principle people should understand. You cannot sin against man because man's fallen. You can only sin against the Creator. And if he's forgiven you, for you not to forgive yourself is an arrogant attitude on your part. And you can't have the flowing power of God to walk with God unless you accept, number one, he's the source of all love, all forgiveness, all wisdom, all knowledge. And as soon as you just, quote, marry your soul with his, which doesn't even require a procedure even like baptism, it's just an outward expression of something that's already existed internally, you now are supernaturally connected to the Creator God, and you're no longer a mortal man or woman, you're now an eternal one. And once you become eternal, you also have a scepter and a power to pick up that scepter and start doing God's will on earth.
Yes. When I started to include the blood surety of Jesus Christ in my paperwork after 22 years of legal writing and legal battle, I've been in at least 50 court cases. I've done everything from foreclosure to traffic to all kinds of stuff. And I actually boiled it down to a very simple argument. And the argument was, can we be free from a world system? And this is before I even started studying the New Testament. Right. And what I found out was the answer is no. Okay, you cannot be free from this world system because they're using your DNA as collateral or surety for debt. And once you understand that, then you go back to Luke 10:27. It says, give the Lord thy God all thy heart, thy soul, thy strength, and thy thought. And if you give all you can to the Lord, that's what will set you free. And the other rule is, and the only law is love another as you love thyself, as you would want to be loved, right? Love thy neighbor as thy love thyself. Because we are a reflection, our inside, our soul is a reflection of how we treat other people.
Well, not only that, I try to teach, I call it, one of the things I tell people is I have a ministry where I will tell people after some prayer and discernment what their name is with the 4 Hebrew letters, because they're all archetypes of word pictures. Mm-hmm. And my specific name is Keeper of the Way, Slayer of the Dragons. The first dragon, of course, is the ego, and the way basically is I call we/I. What we have to understand is we're not just an I, we always have been a we. There's no such thing as reincarnation. We're always carnated with everyone else that has ever existed. Jesus knew that when he said, who touched me? And he's basically saying, whosoever does it to the least of my brothers and sisters, he's doing it to me. What he's really saying is, I recognize I'm both an I and a we at the same time. Mm-hmm. You could be a sovereign individual, but you also are a we. So that if you're going hungry, if someone's going hungry, it's literally a part of your we portion of what you are. And if we all had that attitude and we were totally empathic, we wouldn't drop bombs on each other, we wouldn't do economic devastation, we wouldn't tell lies, we wouldn't do any of these things. In other words, the real solution is to become totally empathic to each other like Jesus was.
Well, and the only way to do that is you have to face your fear and reject it. And if you tried to carry around these burdens yourself, then you will never get to the quick of the matter.
Yeah, and you also have to face sometimes the ugliness in what's in other people. For example, and it's very shocking. I mean, when you start to be empathically connected and you can see the hatred, the sickness, I've never seen an individual...
and that's a reflection of what is in their soul that they're being tormented by. Right. So if someone comes against you in anger, that means inside themselves they are warring with themselves. And they haven't taken the time to actually look at how to overcome that. But those tools, and actually that is my journey when I first came to Christ and what's happened over this time where I've actually had to shed that anger And actually, in my legal journey, I actually had to declare peace with the United States because I was a belligerent. I was someone who was fighting the fight to get back to this constitutional construct that wasn't real in the first place. And I was at war with myself, and I actually had to declare peace in writing in court. And that was quite an interesting time.
Yeah, and what you're doing is you're trying to be a higher language than even the Constitution. The Constitution is a faint reflection of what God's intention was for America.
Well, actually, the word to constitute is to generate a tax document. Actually, republic, if you look in the Bible, the publican was the tax collector. So if you're going to republic, that means you're going to re-tax. And if you ever doubt what I'm saying about that, go to 42 USC, United States Code, section 1981. There's a word in there called exaction. And that's under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that we are liable for exaction of every kind. Extortion is when you pay more money than you owe, but exaction is when you pay money you don't owe.
Wow. And, you know, these words and their evil intent behind them is so damning, isn't it?
Well, it's because look what they've done to the education system. People don't know how to communicate anymore.
Well, the Common Core, too, we give you an example that teach kids that it's important to vaccinate people with GMO crops, so it changes their genetics so they become much more willing to be acceptable, controlled citizens in the Republic. They actually teach that in Common Core.
Yeah, and after 22 years of reading and researching, at one point I was researching about 300 pages of legal documents a day. And so I had to learn the language. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make it so simple for everybody. I'll save you a lot of time. Get a Bible and the Strong's Concordance, and you can find both of them on BibleGateway.com. And the other thing is a site I like. It's called OneLook.com, and it has like 50 dictionaries. So
yeah, I like it too. I have my Strong's Concordance, and I have the physical one years ago. But I have them all now on my iPad and iPhone. It's amazing. I love it because you can actually, if you check through each word, I tell myself what you're really about is you're a biblical locksmith, which is what I am. I call myself a locksmith, not a map maker, because I don't want to set specific dates, but we're like watchmen in the tower saying, hey, if I watch the tumblers here and there and I watch these different codes, God's telling me certain circumstances are going to bring judgment. For example, people are all terrified about things like Cumbra Viejo and Fukushima Daiichi. But you see, God's still on the throne and he's not nervous. So if we submitted ourselves to God, we'd find a technical, geopolitical, scientific solution to each of these things. But because man doesn't, God's lets judgment fall.
Well, thank you so much for the time. And you can go to spiritualsurvival.org, and there is a manual up there. Please, it's free. Take advantage of it.
It's amazing, by the way. Spiritualsurvival.org. Mark Kaplan, thank you. We'll have you back on Tuesday, the 26th,
Wonderful.
The first hour. And go and listen to your program over at RBN. If you go to the website, spiritualsurvival.org, there's lots of links there. And Kathleen's Miracles and both the book and the authors and amazing stuff. I mean, this gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
You know what? It's got to be simple. It's only one book. It's called the Bible.
Yeah, there you go. It's a supernatural, multidimensional book.